like to introduce our first dignitary to the stage. This individual is no stranger to innovation. He is a co-inventor of an ice dispenser, has been working since 2011 to make Louisville a healthier, more compassionate community. Please welcome our mayor, Greg Fisher.
Well, great job. IdeaFestival is something that we look forward to every year. You know, when you think about what we'd like the default culture of our city to be, it's a city of innovation, excitement, aspiration, and IdeaFestival really helps set that tone for us. It's held every September, and what's been really cool about it is that JCPS is no stranger to IdeaFestival. When you think about some of the most really challenging questions that are asked from the audience at IdeaFestival to these learned folks that are usually up on the stage, who do they come from? You guys. So people are like, who are these young people with all these questions? But they're usually a little provocative, a little edgy, then they really come from a great place. So congratulations to you guys. And now to see what's happened, how you've taken that kind of stimulation that you had from IdeaFestival, and I think, are we in our 4th or 5th year now of JCPS IdeaFestival? Our founder, Michael, can't be here with us, but he started at Manual, and a lot of you guys, any Manual folks in the house? But the way that you guys then have spread that throughout all of JCPS is a great, great thing. If you would think whether or not I'm a fan of IdeaFestival, you know where I moved my office during IdeaFestival? Here, right here. So I can be here during IdeaFestival so people understand that our pathway forward to the future is through innovation. Because when you think about the world right now, the world is going through this massive transformation. And we're not going to be able to leap ahead of that if we just kind of plod along. It comes through thinking in breakthrough ways, innovation, and that, of course, is what IdeaFestival is all about. And you just don't want to hear those ideas from old people like me. We got to hear it from young leaders like yourself. You guys are really going to be the ones that are transforming our place. And that's why IdeaFestival for JCPS is so, so critical. And it grows every year, by the way. It's really fun to see it getting bigger, more and diverse ideas, challenging the status quo every year. So good job on that. And it's really important that you guys are heard and really shape the future of our city. I'm grateful to some folks. Chris Kimmel is here. Chris is the founder of IdeaFestival that started us on this journey over a decade ago here in Louisville. Dr. Hargens, she was relatively new to town some 5.5 years ago, so IdeaFestival kind of came in with her and she embraced that, and you can see how it's grown here. So thank you to her and for everybody's work in our Cradle to Career initiative. Cradle to Career is what we call our lifelong learning initiative. So that starts when you're born, goes all the way to you check out of the game. Every day we're learning something new. Every day we're doing a compassionate act, and JCPS has been really supportive of that. And a partner of ours as well. We've got a lot of different innovation activities going on with JCPS, just 3 real quickly. One of them is the Compassionate Schools Project. We're in 3 elementary schools right now, and we're teaching kids to study social and emotional well-being, wellness, nutrition, and then mindfulness and meditation so they can calm down and have what I call have an open mind and an open heart for learning. So that has the potential to be a national model in terms of breakthrough in education. Our Campus Canopy project is helping to put more trees on JCPS campuses so they can become arboretums and have super high air quality as well. And then our College Transition Action Network, that's a texting strategy. So when a student graduates from high school, they don't drop out, melt out, and not go to college. So we keep them encouraged and keep them moving forward. So those are a few simple things, but they're emblematic of how ideas are born, but then you got to put them into action. It's not good enough just to be a big thinker. It's not good enough just to have an idea. You got to put it into action, you got to learn from it, and you got to improve from it. And that's what IdeaFestival is all about. So now, I say, enjoy the day, have a big time, make this the best IdeaFestival ever, and next year make it even better, all right?
Several years ago, the first year that I came to Jefferson County, Manual parent Cindy Perry and her son Michael had an idea. What if students could gather to celebrate creativity and innovation? What if students could present the sessions? What if students could organize it? What if students were trusted to lead it? What if? And I remember that with great clarity. It was in the auditorium at DuPont Manual High School on a Friday afternoon, I believe the week of Derby, where students gathered, or right before Derby, where students gathered to talk about great ideas. So what an honor it is to be here to launch this annual, now district-wide, JCPS Idea Festival. And I think we even have some students who are not in JCPS, who are here learning from JCPS, so thank you for being here. So I want to thank all the students who are involved in the planning, the brainstorming, and the presentations that we look forward to hearing today. Your energy and enthusiasm and intellect make it all possible. Those of you who are in the room are exactly where you need to be today. You will find yourselves surrounded by people like you, curious and creative, who have arrived to explore the question, what if? Throughout history, the brightest minds have gathered to ask this very question. It's a question brimming with hope and innovation and possibility. That question, what if, fuels discoveries, exploration, technology, health, science, democracy, human rights, and the pursuit of happiness. That question brightens the room. It takes a human to the moon, it builds a smartphone, it elevates our possibilities. My wish for you, my hope, is that throughout your lives, you surround yourselves with people who are using their gifts of creativity, intellect, and passion to make someone's life better and brighter.
In America, there are children who wrap themselves in flags of red, white, and blue and never know these colors may soon come to represent everything that is just out of reach. In America, there are children who grow up in a country that may soon abandon them, though it told them from birth it was the ultimate. In America, documents mean more than educational opportunity, more than livelihood, more than a future not plagued by reruns of denying opportunity. In my America, I am an asset, an investment, a student worthy of a chance, but whose America is reality. We are a country bloated with contradiction. This is my message to a dreaming girl. When you were younger, what did you want to be seen as? Successful, educated, equally American. They talk about you as if muffling your voice will suffocate your presence. They don't know that you were going to start a business, that you were going to educate their children, that you were going to change our laws. Maybe you didn't even know about your status. Maybe you had college acceptance letters piled on your nightstand, but then your parents told you, it's too dangerous. Success is dangerous. When you have to fear to succeed because success may expose an identity considered less than, your nation has failed you. Deny that you have contributed to its growth. You can't apply for scholarships. You have to pay out-of-state tuition. Es imposible. But it shouldn't be. Shouldn't be based on what's convenient for America, on when the market needs free labor. We are the descendants of Ellis Island and everywhere else who tell those at another border that their existence is alien. Hey, dreaming girl, we recognize that you are here. We can't let documents mean more than opportunity. What kind of dream is that?
My name is Stephanie Solis.
My name is Maria Martinez.
My name is Mackenzie Berry,
My name is Emma Badia.
and this is Making the Dream Possible.
Our presentation is about making the dream possible, higher education for undocumented students. We are LASSO, the Latin American and Hispanic Student Organization. This is Jasmine Martinez. She's a DuPont Manual alumni. She is undocumented and unafraid, and this is her story.
Hello, I'm Yasmin Martinez, and I'm from Degollado, Jalisco, Mexico, and I currently reside in Louisville, Kentucky. I never really thought about an exact definition, but I always thought that it was living in America with freedom of expression, of being able to live in like any place in the United States without feeling fear. I think that there were different occasions where I did feel some fear, and actually like many occasions where mostly came from my parents who were fearful of my future, of my my well-being, and for myself too. Fearful of my future, fearful of what other peers might think of me if I ever came out as an undocumented immigrant. I don't receive any federal financial aid. I don't have any scholarships because when you're in high school, you have like, everyone's applying to like every college they can think of, and then you're just there like, oh, well, I don't have any resources to find any scholarships, and I'm probably not going to receive them because I just received my Social Security through DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and you're so new to like all of that these people who have been like brought up here and like have maybe counselors or like parents who they pay for counselors to put together their college applications. I didn't have that. I didn't have a way to like research any of that, and really like no one would like know. You're not supposed to receive any federal or any money that comes from the government, or if I were to apply for residential status, that would affect the way my application would go through, and it's, I guess, illegal for us to do that. And I went to Manual High School, which is across the street, and I was in the journalism program. And there I was really passionate about photojournalism, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go to WKU, and I'm going to get a degree in photojournalism. And senior year comes around, and my dad tells me, well, no, you can't do that. You can't go to WKU. You know what would happen to us? We would lose like all our savings and all that. And he told me, just apply to Jefferson Community College and just take your gen eds there and see what happens. And I remember that night I was crying so hard because I was just like, my dad doesn't think I'm good enough. He doesn't think that I could do that. And I just remember that moment. It was actually really tough to accept. It was like a big smack in the face to hear from your dad, like, look, this is your reality. To give you like kind of a reality check of where you stand. And I mean, after that, I knew I couldn't do anything, and I remember my journalism teachers were actually very supportive. I told them about my case, and they tried to find scholarships, but there was really like, it was kind of new to CMA, which is the short term for the journalism program. And I remember them telling me, well, if I can get you into the school, and will you be able to go? And it wasn't that I couldn't go to the school itself, it was a money problem that my parents would have to pay out of pocket, and I didn't want to do that to them, so.
Jasmine still attends JCTC. She's optimistic, and she's still fighting for her dreams.
But unfortunately, Yasmin's story is not anomalous. The number of undocumented students is growing, especially in states like Kentucky that don't have a large historical precedent of undocumented populations. Although the numbers aren't specific for the county, the numbers for the state start around 6,000 undocumented students, ages from 3 to 17. And this is probably an understatement, given that most students are reluctant to say that they are undocumented. However, there is a group of undocumented immigrants who are very vocal advocates for immigration reform. Called Dreamers, these undocumented students, they work together, and they they are fighting for their immigration rights. We have DACA, but DACA is just a Band-Aid solution for a chronic problem. Perhaps the biggest issue with DACA is that it doesn't automatically provide a social security number. And without this vital piece of information, students aren't allowed to apply for FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, which means that they won't receive any Pell Grants or any other financial aid to help them pay for college. And most other financial aid opportunities and scholarships require Social Securities, so the amount of resources given to students are very limited. And it's possible that the price is higher for some students than others because in some states, it's illegal to charge in-state tuition prices for undocumented students, even though they have lived in that state for the majority of their lives. And while DACA itself is a free application, the other components of the process cost money, including the application for the work permit. And it adds up to a total of $465. And fee exemptions do exist, but they're only limited to a certain number of cases, and it's mostly for people with disabilities and health conditions. If a student were to apply for DACA, he or she would then be at risk for deportation proceedings if they were denied. And because of this, many dreamers are reluctant to apply at all because they're scared. And if the students who were accepted or who were denied, they're still at risk too, because DACA is an executive order, not a law. When President Barack Obama leaves office, the next president could revoke DACA, and then all the students would be exposed and at risk for deportation.
This is Jose Antonio Vargas. He immigrated to the United States. When he went to apply for his permit, he found out that his documents were forged. He lived a majority of his life believing that he was documented, but in reality, he was not. However, he didn't let this stop him. He continued to become an amazing journalist, a activist, and a filmmaker. He won a Pulitzer Award for his cover of the Virginia Tech Massacre. He also covered the several presidential campaigns. He profiled Al Gore for the Washington Post and Mark Zuckerberg for the New Yorker. As an activist, he created Define America, which is a movement and a non-profit organization which allows immigrants to share their stories. Jose Vargas couldn't do this alone. He had a support network. His principal and superintendent at his high school allowed him and researched for him different scholarships throughout California and gave him the opportunity to get a private scholarship to a university in California. This allowed him to continue his education. He also had different support networks throughout his life. At his job, some of his coworkers would hide his immigration status, which allowed him to continue to pursue his dreams.
We have developed a two-pronged approach to ensuring that undocumented students in Kentucky get this kind of support. The first part of our solution is a counselor training program. Because undocumented students don't often have a lot of community support when pursuing higher education, it's essential that they have effective institutional support. Unfortunately, and this is especially true in areas like Kentucky that don't have the precedent of large undocumented populations, misperceptions abound. For example, even some high school counselors are under the false impression that undocumented students cannot receive any financial aid from any source whatsoever. While it is extremely difficult for undocumented students to get aid, and they cannot get any federal aid, there are some private scholarships that do not require a Social Security number to apply. In fact, there are some private scholarships aimed specifically for dreamers. Counselors need to know these things so that they can more effectively help undocumented students. This training would also make sure counselors know how to phrase advice to undocumented students. One thing we found in our research is that, unfortunately, because it is a complicated situation, counselors can sometimes resort to being pessimistic. Our training would make sure that counselors know how to remain both realistic and optimistic at the same time. One student reported being told by her counselor there's nothing we can really do for you. We think that armed with facts, they're much less likely to say things like that. A similar program has already been implemented in Chicago schools and is actually recommended by the US Department of Education. The second part of our solution is an online blog, and in this endeavor, we were inspired by activist Angie Rivera. Angie describes herself as undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. As a child, she often heard the phrase, "No le digas a nadie," which means, "Don't tell anyone." She worried what would happen if she disclosed her immigration status. However, in high school, Angie became involved in the Dreamer movement, and this led to the creation of Ask Angie, a forum where undocumented youth would post questions, and which she maintained by answering them. We're developing a similar blog, and we come from the unique perspective of being from Kentucky, which, as stated before, doesn't already have a lot of established institutional support for students. So, our call to action for you today is to visit the blog that we have started, makingthedreampossible.weebly.com, and educate yourselves. Because here's the thing, the undocumented population is a pool of thinkers, creators, and innovators. Helping them succeed is the only way to maximize possibility in contemporary America. And for this reason, today, we invite you to reverse the roles and become their dreamers.
So my name is Habal Jamali, and to clear the air, I would like to state that I am Muslim, if you cannot tell by my headscarf. And I am here to talk about the possibility of accepting diversity, and we are going to start off by first identifying the problem. So when someone sticks out or they're different from a group of people, what problems can happen to that person? And it can go different ways, but I think the two biggest ones are physical and verbal. Physical is more dramatic. I mean, I don't think anyone's gonna fight you, but it does happen. And I think verbal is the easiest one. It can include whispering, quick remarks, sly remarks, and these are issues, but I think the biggest issue is the ignorance that enforces these actions. I think that it's the stereotypes and the prejudice and the racism that people have in them that make them act that way. So we are going to talk about the factors that lead up to the ignorance. Where do these ideas come into people's heads? And I think the biggest influential factor is the media. Since it's such convenient and easy, I think the media has a big role in enforcing ignorance. And the media can be used for good and bad, so we are going to look at some examples. This hashtag, if they gun me down, people took two pictures, one that enforces stereotypes of that minority group, and then one of who they are as a person. The media bias usually leans towards the stereotypes, so I'm pretty sure they'd use the one on the left that shows the black guy as the thug, but they wouldn't use the one where he's a veteran helping children. Our other example is the homemade clock boy, Ahmed Mohammed. He's an example of the outcome media has on people. He made a homemade clock for a science project, and his teacher mistook it as a bomb for his Middle Eastern background, and this shows that media does have an influence on people. This is more of a local example where a local mosque was vandalized, and the media documented Louisville coming together as a community to help one another out, and this is an example of how media can be used for good. So how many of you guys have seen this picture? Raise your hand. Well, if you don't know, this is a viral picture of the drowned Syrian boy. This went viral with the hashtag humanity washed ashore, and millions of people saw it. And for once, the media portrayed Syrian refugees not as terrorists, but as innocent people, even children trying to get a better life. So now it's time for solutions. Personally, I feel like if people are exposed to diversity, they will be able to accept one another easily. So my challenge to you guys today is after our presentations, I want you to meet someone and discuss a stereotype. It can be one that you faced or you've seen someone else face, or one that you know about, and discuss how it's wrong. The stereotype is not true. Take a picture with that someone and post it on either Twitter or Instagram on the JCPS tag JCPS IdeaFestival, and put the hashtag on our way to accepting diversity. And by me being up here telling you guys the problems, the factors, and possible solutions, we will be on the path to the long-term goal of being in a more accepting world. I say long-term because this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but since we are the future generation, and I'm here to present this idea to you guys, we can be the generation that makes a change. Thank you.
All lives matter. Doesn't matter the race. We live in the same world. We live in the same place. My name is Jonathan Neal, and I'm one of the founders of the All Lives Matter movement, and I'm a junior at Central High School. This is our group when it first started, early 2015, and we had a conversation with the chief of police to learn how to curb the violence in our city. And now we have thousands of people all across the nation wanting to join our movement, and we had a quote on our back the whole entire time. This is the quote: "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter," said by Dr. Martin Luther King. And things we're becoming silent about is this. Late last year, Huffington Post made a post about the 9 most segregated cities in the United States. This is a city, and in the red spots, that means it's 80% or more white. And then in the blue spot, that means it's 80% or more African American. And does anybody recognize what this city is? This is the 4th most segregated city in the United States, Louisville, Kentucky. And local media even highlights this issue. And we have housing segregation in our community. And we have neighborhoods such as Park Hill and Shawnee that are all black, and Deer Park and Indian Hills that are all white. And a resident, Dwayne Campbell, says when young people don't see their community change for the better, they begin to lose hope. And we're beginning to lose hope in our community, and losing hope can lead to cruel choices. Does anybody know what this is a graph of? This is a graph of the homicides in Louisville. And last year, we beat the all-time record set in 1970s with 84 homicides. So could I have the first 4 rows in every section please stand? This is about how many people were murdered last year. So what does media have to say about, you can sit down now. So let's hear what media has to say about this.
It grabs people's attention. Here's a man who was found innocent, after 18 years in prison, and now, oh my gosh, he could be back in jail for a crime he really did commit. Right now, murder is hot. That's what everyone wants. That's what the competition wants. And we're trying to beat out the other networks to get that perfect murder story.
But murder is not hot. Murder is tragic. Does anyone know who this is? This is Nariah Miller, and she was barely 2 when she was murdered on her front porch. And she was the catalyst of our movement, and one of the reasons why we started this movement. Another reason is social justice. We strive on the distributions of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within our society. And we have to start fighting for these privileges. And we're happy to say that WDRB President Bill Lamb has acknowledged our efforts in fighting for these privileges. Now that you've heard what my passion is, what is your passion? Take some time to think about what your passion is. And then now turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor what your passion is. This year's All Lives Matter challenge is to get 20,000 people to pledge to be violence-free. But within a week, we want 2,016 pledges in hopes that Louisville will become a less violent city this year. So if you want to pledge during lunch, we'll have members of the All Lives Matter movement outside the doors when you go to lunch, and you can pledge with them. And to keep up with our movement, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at All Lives Matter Movement, and Twitter, of course, at You Matter, We Matter. And if you want to get your friends and families to pledge, pledge online, you can go to causes.com/ALMM. Thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you learned something today.
So why don't you guys start by kind of discussing what got you interested in your topics of discussion for today? So Heba, why don't we start with you?
For 2 reasons. Personally, I grew up in obviously the Muslim background, so I experienced things. And then at Fairdo, we have classes called the Cambridge program, and they're pretty much revolved around global perspective. So you get to see situations and see how other countries respond to them. And pretty much you're forced into staying up with, keeping up with the news. So I started looking up the news and seeing what's going on in the world, and I saw that a lot of minority groups were struggling in the world, in different parts of the world, like locally, nationally, and globally, and that's what got me started.
Like I said, Naraya Miller, she was one of the catalysts, and we strive on social justice. And we really felt like no teens in Louisville were speaking up. So we decided one day we just had an interview with WDRB, and this is how the movement started. And I guess that's...
Well, we always knew that we wanted to do something about an issue that was important to the Hispanic or Latino community, but obviously that's a really broad range of topics. At the same time, Maria and I had both personally known people who are undocumented and recognized all the struggles that they face in the education system. And so one thing that really struck us when we began our research was the scope of the Dreamer movement of young undocumented people. Because here was the activism and the bravery that we knew on a personal level, but multiplied on this huge scale throughout the country. And so that's what inspired us for our presentation.
What Emma said, I totally agree. But my family and I, we immigrated from Colombia when I was 6, so I've always felt strong tie to the immigrant community. Although I'm not undocumented, I can still relate to their stories.
So Jonathan, you gave us a little summary of your All Lives Matter movement, but can you tell us more about what the movement does to improve the Louisville community?
So right now what we're doing is on every 3rd Saturday, we work with another organization called Glory, and it was started by my mom's friend, Tamika Copridge, and what she does is basically she takes inner city kids and she goes to the parks and she picks them up and she brings them into her church and she feeds them lunch for that entire day, and she makes sure they're okay when they go home, and she brings inspiring speakers to talk to the kids. Like one day we had a movie producer, one day we had a music producer, and then I talked to the kids too, and a couple of other my members. And we also go out into the community with Senator Gerald Neal every Saturday, and we talk to the community and we influence the community to play an active role in making our city better. And we also participate in summits and we speak at events too.
So for all of you guys, what efforts have you made or been involved in to embrace diversity and kind of foster an accepting atmosphere in Louisville? So Maria, we'll start with you.
Well, at Manual, our school is really diverse, so that has really helped me understand different cultures. But even in the Latino community, I understand the differences, especially with our organization, LASSO, because even between the Latino community, there are a lot of differences. For example, Emma is from Spain, and I'm from Colombia, and we still, the way we speak and our cuisine is different, so yeah.
And if I could just add one funny story related to that is, obviously Maria and I are both in the group Latin American and Hispanic Student Organization, or LASSO, at school. And so one thing LASSO does is we all have parties together. And so at one of the very first LASSO parties I was going to, we had to sign up and say what food we were bringing. So in this country, we probably think of a tortilla as like what a Mexican tortilla would be, so something made out of corn or flour to make tacos or whatever with. But in Spain, a tortilla is actually more like an omelet, and it's made with eggs. So I was signing up for my food for the party, and I said I was bringing a tortilla, and they were like, really, just one? I was like, yeah, just one. They were like, okay, so is it made out of corn or flour? And I was like, it's made out of eggs. And they were like, that sounds disgusting. But then I explained to them the difference, and I brought it to the party, and everyone liked it, by the way. But I think that just goes to show that even just little things can be wildly different, even within one category like Hispanic.
Could you repeat the question?
What efforts have you made to foster diversity and acceptance in Louisville?
The All Lives Matter movement, we accept everybody. It kind of states that in our title. But what we do is we never turn away anybody, and I feel like that's one way we foster diversity in the city of Louisville, because we accept everyone.
Personally, I try to be like a good person, a good citizen, to like prove the stereotypes wrong. But I think the biggest thing I've done to foster diversity is coming up here and present in front of you guys. That's the biggest thing
You did a great
I've done.
job too.
Thank you.
So what do you guys see as one of the biggest social hurdles that the United States is facing going forward in the 21st century? Heba, why don't you start?
I think awareness. People don't know what's going on, or they don't understand. So I think maybe if they can't get it from the media, they can look it up on their own. They could ask people around them. So I think awareness is the biggest one.
I agree with Heba, but also I think activists and advocates are one of the biggest things, because I sit down with civil rights activists and they're scared about who's gonna hold the future in their hands, who's gonna be the next activist. So I think that's one of the biggest problems we'll have to worry about.
Well, I would go right along with Heba. I think that, especially considering our topic, I think that ignorance is one of the biggest issues that we face, because thankfully, I think that a lot of people in our society have moved past outright antagonism, but now the biggest hurdle we face is just making sure people are educated. And like I said in our presentation, I think that's the best way to help people who come from a different background than your own.
Yeah, I agree with Emma and Heba, but I also agree that some of us, we don't have the motivation to educate ourselves. If we need to become curious about the issues that are around us, and we cannot let just media tell us, inform us. We have to go and find the information ourselves.
So Jonathan, why did you decide to name your group the All Lives Matter group? I know recently it's been a little bit controversial. How do you respond to people that say that you're undermining the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I say that we're not in the business of building walls, and we're in the business of bridging the gap. And so that's what we're all about, is bridging that gap between all the organizations. Like I said in my mission statement, I think, we're here to unify organizations, and we're not here to take away from anybody. We're here to unify all of us together.
So Heba, you discussed in your presentation and in this discussion that you are a Muslim woman, and I know that you've probably faced a lot of prejudices in your life. Can you just explain a few experiences that you've had, and how do you respond when you're faced with ignorant comments?
As a little kid, I've had people say, "Oh, you're a terrorist," but looking back at it, they didn't know any better, and I've just gotten used to that statement towards me. I don't react or anything. But as a Muslim woman, I get asked, "Oh, so are you forced to wear that?" And they're referring to my headscarf. And I asked them, "No, this is my choice." And after they realize, "Oh, I'm not being forced into it, this is my choice," they get more curious and want to know actually what the real reason is.
I'm going to talk to you today about the device I made. So let's get to it. Oh, yes, sponsors. Glow Touch, thank you to Glow Touch, a beer nose. We'll get to that again in a sec. So, Hearing for All, that's the name of my project, and I'm Mukon, and I'm a junior at DuPont Manual High School. So, before I dive in, this is my grandfather over here, and in case you couldn't tell, that is me. Some of that photo has changed, hopefully, and not really the glasses. I've kind of kept those. But for the most part, everything is kind of different. So summer after freshman year, I visited India, and that's where my grandfather lives. And he'd had hearing loss for a while. Show of hands, how many of you know someone with hearing loss? And how many of you have that person who just denies it and don't want to admit they have hearing loss? Right. So that's my grandfather, and freshman year, after freshman year, this summer, I visited him, and we finally convinced him to get his hearing loss treated. And he lives in India, so we had to get an audiologist. We booked the appointment. It took forever. We got there, and they ripped us off. They just completely ripped us off. And the entire experience really made me think, like, how is hearing loss treated in the developing world? And, like, is it always like this? Is it this bad? And what I found really blew me away. So 360 million people in the world today have hearing loss. So that's like 1 million people for every day of the year. And about 90% of them live in the developing world, and access to healthcare is really limited in the developing world, as you can imagine. Additionally, 324 million people out of that 360 million people are untreated. So putting this into perspective, the US population as of today is about 316 million people. So more people have untreated hearing loss than there are people in the United States right now. And that's really because of two main reasons: affordability and accessibility of healthcare today. So let's break that down. Affordability. So $1,500, that's the cost of a set of hearing aids, the average cost of a set of hearing aids. This doesn't include the cost of a hearing test, so the machinery for a hearing test is about $850. You take it in a soundproof room, which is thousands of dollars. You get an audiologist, and they rip you off, and so it adds up, and you get a lot of money. Keeping that in mind, I found the median income per year in India is $616. So that means you can save up for 2 years, spend nothing. If you survive that, you still won't have enough money to buy a set of hearing aids. Forget about the doctor's appointment and all of that. So affordability is obviously a problem, but in addition to that, accessibility is a problem. So the numbers you see right here next to the names of the countries are the numbers of doctors per 1,000 people. So that's a good way to measure the accessibility to healthcare in a country. And so you can see the Sweden, UK, United States, they all have numbers above 2 doctors per 1,000 people. And that's pretty much a standard for developed countries. But you look at countries like India, Bolivia, Liberia, those don't even reach 1 doctor. Additionally, audiologists, who are the doctors who take care of hearing aids and hearing tests and stuff like that, they're a very specialized kind of doctor. So you can pretty much half those numbers, and that's what you're looking at for audiologists. So it's obvious that hearing loss is a problem, but why does it matter? Why do we need to care? Hearing loss has 3 main impacts on society which make it important. There's a functional impact. So if you have hearing loss, day-to-day activities, driving a car, watching TV, going to the groceries, those become really difficult. So can you imagine like driving down the street and not being able to hear a police siren, or watching TV? Need I explain why that would be difficult without hearing? So obviously a functional aspect is there. You have a societal aspect. So with my grandfather, the big thing was we used to make long-distance calls to India, and the connection as it is through long-distance calls are abominable, and then with the hearing loss, it just gets worse. And you know, there are little moments in life you don't want to miss because of your hearing loss, and so it becomes a really big thing. And then there's the economic impact. When you have hearing loss, especially in the developing world where a lot of the jobs are manufacturing and so you need your hearing, you just can't get a job, or you won't be as productive as you could be if you had your hearing. And so those are the 3 main reasons why hearing loss is really important. So I'm talking about all this healthcare and stuff, but what is this healthcare? How does it work, like a hearing aid and a hearing test? So the healthcare for audiology has 2 main parts: a hearing test and a hearing aid. So a hearing test has 1 main job. It measures how much hearing loss a patient has. So a doctor will take you into a room, the soundproof room, and they will play sounds in your ears, and basically you raise your hand if you hear the sound, and if you don't hear the sound, you're not going to raise your hand because you don't know there's a sound there. And so the audiologist is there to see whether you were able to hear it, and they record how much hearing loss you have at a specific frequency. And that's measured in decibels of hearing loss. Decibels is a unit of volume. After that, you go to the hearing aid, and the hearing aid is what treats that hearing loss. And it basically has 1 job. It increases the volume of incoming sounds based on how much hearing loss you have. So you have like 30 decibels of hearing loss. Depending on the doctor you go to, your hearing aid will be amplifying your sound by 25 to 30 or even 35 decibels. So that's basically what they do. So 324 million people, $1,500 a device, inaccessible doctors. How do you solve the problem? Well, the first step is to not look at the problem at all. You break it down into smaller, more manageable chunks. So what I did was I found out what I had to do to solve those problems. The 2 main points were to reduce the price of these devices and to make the user self-reliant. That's a euphemism for get rid of the doctor. And I'm really sorry to any doctors in the audience, but doctors make healthcare really inaccessible sometimes. And so the idea was if the user can take a hearing test without a doctor, then they don't have to wait for a doctor's appointment. They don't have to go to a clinic and all of that. They can do it in their home by themselves. That's still pretty hard to work towards as in terms of like a technical objective. You don't really know how to program self-reliance. That's not how it works. So I started breaking it down even more. So to reduce the price, I needed to find hardware or like circuit boards that were really cheap and could do the job of a hearing aid today. And I needed to find software, or I needed to write software that was going to be able to replace an audiologist and make the user self-reliant. Still, it's a little difficult to work towards. So finally, here's my final solutions. I needed to get a signal processor. A signal processor is a very specialized circuit board made for processing signals. That's what a hearing aid does. It takes your incoming signals, so the real world sound, it amplifies and it spits it back out to you. And then I needed to have the code so that it could take the place of an audiologist, run a hearing test, and then be a hearing aid. So I started with the hardware. So on the left here, you see that says Mini DSP, Arduino DSP Shield, all the way down to Teensy 3.1. Those are the names of different circuit boards I tested. And on the top, those are 3 different criteria or objectives that that hardware had to be able to satisfy. So what I did was I looked at hearing aids today, and I basically looked at how they worked and what they were able to do, and those are the 3 things that define the hardware of a hearing aid. So first, it has to be able to run a complex filter so it can increase the volume. That's basically what that means. It has to be able to receive inputs, because if your hearing aid isn't receiving inputs, you're basically wearing earplugs, and that's not really helpful. And it has to be able to process sound in less than 0.2 seconds. Because if there's a lag of more than 0.2 seconds between what you see and what you hear, you'll notice it and it can throw you off big time. So I tested these 4 different pieces of hardware, and what I found was the Teensy 3.1, and I actually have it here. So the Teensy 3.1 is an open source, here it is, it's an open source, low cost processor, and it's extremely powerful. It's $15, you can buy it online. And by open source, I mean if you look up the name of this device online, you can find schematics, blueprints basically, to how to make the device on your own. And that's really powerful, because if you look up a hearing aid online or you look up an iPhone, I guarantee you're not going to find a schematic for that. And if you could, we would never buy from Apple ever again, and they would never make any money. But the idea is to make these devices very accessible. So I wanted a device that was open source, so that even if they couldn't buy a device from me or from whoever else is selling this device, they can make it themselves. So I got the hardware put together, and that's actually what I'm holding here in my hand. The Teensy 3.1 is kind of elevated. You see it's a rectangle there. And then right here, you probably may not recognize it, but that's a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, the exact same headphone jack on your phone. So basically, instead of having it fit in your ear, I added headphones. So in case the headphones break, you just buy a new pair of headphones. You can replace it. Again, keep it as accessible as possible was the idea. So I got the hardware done, but the solution had 2 components. The digital signal processor, which is in my hand, but now I had to write code to replace the audiologist. So that's what I did. So this is the code. This is half the code. This is the other half of the code. It's daunting to look at. It's about 750 lines long. Really, 750 lines isn't that much, but yeah, that's what it is. So I'll break down parts of it. I'll promise, it's not as bad as it looks. So what I'm about to show you are little chunks of code called functions. So most of you have probably taken Algebra 2. Functions are basically like, what they do is they take an input, they do something to that input, and then they push it back out, right? So if I have a function 3x plus 1, if I put in 0, the function spits out 1, right? Okay, so this function is a little bit different. What it does is it takes the name of a sound file and it plays that sound file for me. So this is really important because to run a hearing test, I need to be able to play those sound files to the user, and this chunk of code did that for me. This is probably my favorite piece of code. That's the nerdiest thing I've ever said. This is the calibration function. So when you take a hearing test, you take it in a soundproof room, and that's really easy for a doctor because they don't have to take into account all the ambient noise, right? So if I took a measure of how much noise there is in this room right now, I'd probably get like 10, 15 decibels, right? Soundproof room, you don't have to worry about that. But I do have to worry about that because my device doesn't have a soundproof room attached. So what I did was I needed to find a way to make sure the device was at the same volume as the noise around the person. So what I did was I took a recording of my dad rubbing his hands together because I needed a sound that was everywhere in the world, no matter where you are. So try rubbing your hands together right now. So that sound is what you do with your hands, and as you do that, the sound of my dad's hands rubbing together are in your ear, and you match the volume of the device and what you're hearing in real life. And once those two sounds match, you know that the device is at the same volume as everything around you because you're hearing it at the same level. So that's how you calibrate the device. And so that's what all that code does. And finally, this is probably the most important chunk of code in the whole thing. The hearing aid has one job, to amplify incoming sounds according to the results of your hearing loss, and that's what this does. So you can see it's called mixed gain because amplification in technical terms is called gain. So what this does is it takes the results of the hearing test and it uses a few equations right here, and it basically determines how much gain there is, how much gain needs to be applied. So again, all of those little components came together and it made all of this code. So that was the software. So basically what I did was I took a hearing test, I took the soundproof room, I took the audiologist that gives the hearing test, I took the results of the hearing test, I took the hearing aid, and I took another audiologist that programs the hearing aid, and I put it into one completely open source, integrated hearing test and hearing aid that eliminates a doctor while keeping it completely open source. And so that's what my project is. Yeah, so that's the device. Actually, to take a hearing test, you need buttons and stuff. So this is the hardware I'm working with right now. It's kind of big, but it'll get smaller. I'll get there. So why does this matter? Why do you guys care? I mean, it's interesting, but now what? You can do anything with the internet is the point I'm trying to make. So when I started this project, this was the summer of my freshman year, or after my freshman year. I didn't know how to program. I didn't know how to use any of this. I barely knew how to operate my own computer. But the thing is, I came in with an idea, and I knew what I wanted to get done. I broke it into smaller chunks so I could see an end goal. And then what I did was I used the internet and I used my resources to help me along the way. So I didn't spend any money in teaching myself this. You can find all of this on the internet. So I learned how to program with Code Academy and Treehouse, and I recommend that every person in this room learns how to program. I didn't know I was a technical person until I started this project, and most people don't know they're a technical person until they actually start working with stuff. But even if you're not, you should learn how to program. It's really cool, and it's a good skill to have just in case. It's also very easy to learn. Code Academy, you can learn a whole programming language in about 7 hours if you focus, or 2 weeks if you don't focus like me, but you can get it done. Additionally, this device is part of a company called Arduino, or it's kind of a subsidiary, but Arduino is a corporation that makes open source, so completely schematic online devices. So these are two of their devices. They're called Arduinos, and they're used to help people learn how to use electronics and how to program, because today's economy is revolving around STEM and stuff like that. We really should learn how to program. In fact, I really think we should replace cursive in the 2nd grade with programming. Cursive was so awful. Anyways, yeah. But Arduinos, that's what you guys should all, after you learn how to program, get involved with Arduinos, and you can do anything. You can even make a hearing aid with them if you know what you're doing. So yeah. So basically my thing to leave you with, my idea to leave you with, is to make something. You know, look around you. There are tons of problems in the world. No one in this room can say that we have a perfect world right now. And there is a solution to some of these problems, most of these problems. So my thing for you guys to do is to look around you, find a problem, and just start working at it. Even if you don't know what you're doing, just start working at it, and it'll work itself out, I promise. So that's my project, Amplify Life. So do you guys have any questions? Line up. Oh, yes. Line up. There's microphones, I think, there and there. Yeah.
Can I go first?
No. I can't.
Shark Tank?
All right, so I guess we'll start it with you.
All right, I'm a junior at Fern Creek High School,
Yeah.
and I just want to know if what you made, really helped your grandfather out.
So yeah, my grandfather has used it before, but it's still kind of weird looking, and it's a circuit board and it's pointy. So he will hopefully use it eventually. But no, he's not using it right now. He has an actual hearing aid right now. But yeah, he's following the project. He calls me a lot, asks me. So yeah, I guess you.
I'm a freshman at Atherton High School. I was just wondering if you would go to like Shark Tank to help you build your company.
So
or whatever you're doing.
So this device is for the developing world, right? Because a lot of people in the U.S. can't afford a hearing aid, but a lot of people in like the developing world can afford it. So the idea wasn't so much to make money off of it. What I was going to do is, since it's open source, you really can't patent it, you can't copyright it. You put a license on it and you say it's your idea, and then you give it to the rest of the world to do for themselves. So the idea was to not necessarily make it myself and give it to people, but to give it to an organization that knows a little bit more like what they need to do, because I have no clue what I need to do in terms of how to give it to people. So like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the UN, you give the rights to this device to them, and they take the show from there. They distribute it, they make it, and that's it. So I don't know about Shark Tank.
My name is Saren, and I'm a sophomore at DuPont Manual. And my question for you is, what was your hardest issue, I guess, that you had to like work through, and how did you solve it?
That's a good question. So this was my science fair project. This is my science fair project. Like I said, I started it kind of sophomore year and summer after freshman year. Until then, I'd worked in a lab, and I don't know what you guys know about labs, but labs, everything is laid out. You know what you're doing. It's very organized, and this is not like that. This was 2 a.m. I got an idea suddenly, wake up, put it down, and then go back to sleep before I forget it. And the hardest part was probably wanting to quit, because there are a lot of times where you're like you banging your head against the wall for a week, you haven't come up with anything, and you're like, if I was at a lab, this would be done years ago, and someone would probably do it for me. So that was probably the challenge, making myself not quit. That was it. Yeah, so, yeah.
Hi, I'm Mason Miller from Atherton High School. What language were you coding in?
That's a good question. So I started with Python because originally, before I got to the Teensy, I programmed it on a Raspberry Pi. Do you know what a Raspberry Pi is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a Raspberry Pi is like a $35 computer you can buy online, and it's a full computer. It's actually awesome. Buy one of those too, in addition to an Arduino. I should have put
Yeah,
so I started with the Raspberry Pi, and I programmed a full hearing test, and then I realized that I can't run a hearing aid on a computer because you just can't do it. I needed a signal processor. So I went to the Teensy, and the whole thing's coded in C++. Yeah. All right.
My name is Gatlin, and I go to Iroquois High School.
Yeah.
I have a question. You compared your product to the $1,500 for the normal hearing devices. How much in the very end would your hearing device cost?
So right now, all the components put together, about $70. When you mass produce something, you can drop it by about 30%. So it'll probably come out to about $50, give or take. So, yeah. Okay. And I think, sorry,
Thank
but
you,
this is
Mukan.
the last question. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
They're
Mukan.
kind of pushing it. So, yeah.
My name is Theo, and I'm a junior at Atherton High School.
Okay.
And I have neurological hearing loss. It's very cute, but it's still there. And I was wondering if you think that we're on the way, on a way to developing a hearing aid that is able to help people who their hearing loss is just completely in the brain.
Right, so this is for sensory neural hearing loss, and you probably know what that is. Sensory neural hearing loss is the most common type, so I'm sure you've all heard about how headphones break your ears if you play them too loud, and that's because you have little ear hairs in your ears, and if your sound's too loud, those flatten and they can't wiggle around to pick up your sound. So that's what this treats. Neurological hearing loss is a lot more complicated because it's not a simple ear hair problem, it's in your brain. I looked at it, there's some work with like electrodes, and it was way above my pay grade, but it looks promising. I think it's cool, and I think they're making like making it work. So there's hope, right? So yeah.
Thank you.